Good morning.
Good morning. We are live. It is September 11th, 2023, and this is Real Estate Now. That is quite the intro. I love our intro.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
but
sorry. I was
uh,
going to say I'm Stacey Chevalier. I was messing up the intro, and this is
well, I mean, legalese is there. Real Estate Now. Keith Pitch, Stacey, what's up? I have a little technical difficulties this morning here in the office. I am in the office, as you can see. The internet is not in the office this morning.
so
So,
Coeur d'Alene. There's more important things to do there than be on the internet.
right, I guess so. I guess so. So I'm using my phone today, as you can tell. I hope my arm doesn't go numb while we're talking today, but we'll get through it. As I mentioned earlier, we got our Fast Five and a great show coming up to you today. Titled today is Blue Collar Millionaires and the Next Wave of the Workforce here in America. But before we get into that, we got to do our Fast Five.
Yep.
And we have to start with the most important Fast Five I think we've brought to the show yet is today is September 11th. We are 22 years in the past. Was 9/11, that fateful day. We all remembered it. We were talking backstage about it. And just, never forget. And I hope our country doesn't need something that catastrophic to come back together, especially right now, coming out of COVID and all that was. I think we could take some lessons learned from that.
We
And
can,
get
but
together.
it's so ingrained in my mind. Like we all know where we were, what was going on, exactly the moment it happened. But
Yeah,
there's also generations behind us that didn't experience that, right? They weren't.
yeah,
Some weren't born, some were too young. So it's our responsibility to keep the story and the remembrance alive, and so
yeah.
that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, this past summer after school, we went. I went with my daughter to New York City, and we went to Ground Zero there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's amazing. And for those of you that have young ones, you definitely need to take them. It is part of our fabric, and definitely go get that. So,
Well, prayers
uh,
and hugs to everybody impacted.
yeah, absolutely. So, changing topics. The next topic that we want to talk about on our Fast Five is the Fed is meeting next week. I think it's next week. Yes, it's next week. The Fed is meeting, and they are definitely anticipating another rate increase. So just keep that on the forefront of your guys' mind when you're talking about home equity lines of credit, when you're talking about credit cards, that kind of stuff. That's all tied to Wall Street Journal Prime, which is what they're going to adjust up another 0.25 or a quarter percent. So
It's
just get ready
interesting
for
you say
that.
that, Keith. I just only because there's also a lot of talking heads out there saying it might not happen. So what you're hearing is definitely I'm hearing a maybe. So maybe we need to see what happens next week.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. And the market's already priced it in. So I'll say this: if it doesn't happen, that would be super good for the bond market. It'd be actually bad for the bond market. There'd be some sell-off, but it would be good for the mortgage market. It'd also be good for our credit card interest rates and all that good stuff. So I think it's going to happen, and I think what we'll see is a slowing down into Q4, but we'll see what plays out.
Right.
So. Just stay tuned next week. Here we go. The next one, and Keegan, you're just going to have to help me out because I don't have the banners up. The next one, I'm pretty sure, was Richard Kiyosaki dropped a bomb this weekend, in my opinion, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and said that Airbnbs are going to lead the next real estate downturn. And in the article that we'll share here, I don't have my setup up, so I can't share the link right now. But he was basically saying some very interesting things are happening in major metropolitan areas such as New York, San Francisco, Chicago. They're just straight up cutting it off, saying Airbnb, short-term rentals, you're done, not in my backyard.
Which is pretty crazy. So, I mean, some cities have really strict rules, or some
Right.
states like Hawaii, but they still allow it to an extent. So to say you can't have it at all, but you were saying behind the show that Coeur d'Alene is almost went down that path and then they didn't. So what happened so it didn't happen? Like, did the community get together and fight against it? Like, is there anything people can do in San Francisco or New York if they want this to stay?
Get together, get a coalition together. You have to get together, and you have to have a voice bigger than the city council, and you have to bring the information to the city council, and quite honestly, hold them accountable to whatever laws, rules, and regulations you have in your city. What happened here was they again used the housing crisis. We're not building enough houses. We're not. We don't have enough housing units for everybody. So they're saying, well, this is just making it worse. So in a city of 70,000 people, we're talking about 900 units. It's not a huge impact. And so we put it back on the city council. Show us the issues, show us the problems, show us the nuisance that you're saying is happening. And it really wasn't. So you got to get together and you have to beat the drum louder. And quite frankly, there's a lot of things that happen in times of, quote, distress or emergency. And when we have shortage in housing units, they're going to pull anything that they absolutely can. And just keep in mind, if hotel lobbies and the tourism district is behind it, they could be swaying the city council a different way, which I think may have been an issue around here.
Yeah, and it was definitely, that's what's happening in Hawaii too, for sure.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right, what's next?
Crazy. So controversy, conspiracy, maybe you love it. Our fun little talk today is about the pumpkin spice latte. It's already out, and I had this conversation with Melanie. It's like, oh yeah, it was out in August. Stacy, is August too early to be launching the pumpkin spice latte?
I'm not a, what is it, PSL?
I'm
not a PSL. I don't drink coffee. I'm a bad person to ask. I think it's way too early. And why PSL? Just get a chai latte. Isn't it kind of the same?
Yeah, chai lattes are awesome. Especially, yeah. So I thought that was quite interesting that they launched it in August, which is still the dead of summer. But I guess if you're jonesing for your fall drink in the middle of August.
I mean, maybe some states don't really have seasons. Up in the Northwest, we have 4 distinct seasons. So it's like it came too early.
Oh, come on. Bellevue has 2 distinct seasons, raining and not raining.
No, we have snow and winter and beautiful fall.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Finally, I am totally blanking on the last thing.
We were talking about how there's articles out from Housing Wire saying that the home prices,
The price reductions are on the rise.
Reductions are increasing.
Reductions are increasing.
Right, and that's like the headline, and they're saying this is showing that home prices are going down, right? And they're going to stabilizing lower. But if you look at the actual facts, since we have that in our industry, and you back up to like 2020, 21, 22, as the decreases increased, the home prices also increased. So people were just overpricing their houses, hoping to get more. And so those decreases are more, but the house prices are still going up. So be careful with headlines.
Yeah. So yeah, you got to be careful. You got to read the major headlines with a grain of salt and read the whole article. Usually in those types of write-ups, you see in the last paragraph or two, oh, but year-over-year appreciation is on pace for 7%.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, so that's really the story, and you just threw a grab me, click me bait headline on the story. So anyway, fun times. So yes, we're still on the rise as far as the trajectory of appreciation, and I'm not too worried about that going forward because we're just not building enough. We don't have enough people to build enough homes, and I think that's a great little segue into our amazing guest today, Ike, Coach Ike with Prime to Rise. Welcome to the show, and glad you're here on Real Estate Now, my friend.
I'm glad to be here, and I have to say this pumpkin spice conversation is something that has driven me nuts for years. Not even as a latte guy. I'm not a latte guy, but I am a pumpkin beer guy.
Okay.
From New England, they have a Shipyard Pumpkinhead, and Sam Adams has their Oktoberfest. Yeah. And it comes out in like October, and by the time the leaves turn, it's already gone. It's like, this is not the time that I need to have this stuff. So it's been something that's bugging me for years.
So you want the pumpkin beer out in August? Is that what you're saying?
No, I want it like in October, like when it's
In
supposed to.
October. Got it.
It comes out in like
Seasonally appropriate. That's what it's about.
yeah.
Right on. Well, hey, Ike, the reason why I reached out to you, we connected on Instagram, and I loved your message. I love what you're doing with helping people find alternatives out there. In the name of today's show is Blue Collar Millionaire. There's a new wave of the future coming down the pipe about the workforce that we're seeing out there. So tell us a little bit about that and your background.
Yeah, that's a big question, Keith. But yeah, let's start with the background because Ike was kind of telling me about it before the show, and I find it fascinating. So let's start there.
Yeah, wave of the future, wave of the past, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're coming back to it. It's like a ripple. So yeah, my message is basically just a lot of young people today, they see boots in jeans, and that's what they think of in construction. They think that it's slave driving, they're going to ruin their body, they're never going to make any money, and somebody's just trying to keep them down. That couldn't be further from the truth. Now, I was very privileged in a sense that where I grew up, everybody's dad, not to put a gender to it, but everybody's dad was in construction when I was growing up. So I was abundantly aware of all of the opportunities that were there and how much money could be made just by putting on boots and jeans. But I was also aware that you could move into the office as an estimator and as a project manager and as an engineer and as an architect and now like I'm an executive, right? Like typically when I go to a job site now, I have a shirt and tie on, right? I don't have a shovel or a hammer in my hand.
Right. Not wearing jeans and boots.
Exactly. So I was very fortunate, and I would not use my career as maybe the average or like the baseline for what most people go through. I am way ahead of the curve for my age, but that's because I started taking advantage of those opportunities when I was 13, 14 years old, and I was getting work experience that people don't get until they're 23, 24. So I had a 10-year head start on everybody. So I worked my way up, literally sweeping floors, digging holes, scrubbing toilets. And then I started, unloading sheet metal trucks. And then I designed HVAC. And then I went to college and I was designing. I mean, if you're familiar with Boston, when you come out of the airport, there's a big rental car facility there. When I was 19 years old, HVAC, plumbing, and fire protection. You'll go look at the drawings. You'll see my initials on them, right?
Wow.
So I got very good experience at a young age, and then I jumped over to the general contracting side, which is what I've been doing now for about 10 years. And the opportunities to do that, I think we have poor messaging to young people where it's like, oh, go find yourself and go, take some time off, and like, oh, you just don't even need to think about what you really want to do until you're out of college. It's like, okay, or you can think about it, think about your purpose, how you want to serve that, invest in a education, in a career that you know is going to give you the highest return on investment with the most quantitative amount of opportunities out there. And if you start investing when you're 14, 15, 16 years old in high school, by the time you hit your early 30s, we're not talking about, I think the top 4% makes 150 grand a year.
Yeah.
We're talking about higher than that at a very young age when other people are buried in student loans and other people are struggling to even crack 100. So you don't have to be, not everybody wants to be in an office. There's plenty of opportunity. We're going to talk about it. Supply and demand. That's like the number one rule in business. So if you want to invest in something that's going to give you a return, go for something with a low supply and a high demand.
Yeah.
We just talked about housing crisis. We couldn't build if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? So if you were in the stock market and you wanted to buy low and sell high, we're at the low. Buy in now.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you grew up in Boston, you were surrounded by your dad and your friends' dads, and so you had this opportunity. When you go into schools, so now you're in Florida, when you go into schools, and I don't know if you talk to schools around the country, and they don't have that, maybe it's my son and I'm definitely not in construction. How do you get a 13, 14-year-old that experience?
So first you got to get their attention, right? So you got to start talking about money right away. And I will say that the messaging around the country, because I have mentored in after school programs since 2012, 2013, The messaging from LA to New York to Boston to Florida is very, very different.
Oh.
I will say Florida seems to have, they seem to be more bought in to exposing kids to this, especially with how much money could be made versus other professions, right? Like I'll tell you, the average starting salary for a biology or psychology major coming out of college is less than $30,000 nationally. Okay. You can be a plumber. I just released an episode today. A plumber at 22 years old, non-union, non-prevailing wage, can be making $70,000 to $80,000 a year. That's outside the city, mostly residential work. And that's just like, you just know you're 22 years old, you barely know what you're doing. Okay. So that messaging needs to be there, and it needs to be up front.
Is that like an apprentice wage, or is that after you've gone through that apprentice stage to get there?
So unions probably have the best apprentice program, right? So if you're in a big city like a Seattle, like heavy union, Boston, heavy union, Chicago, the big ones are all heavy union. My father was union for 40 years. I mentioned that, I was exposed to that. That was my plan coming out of school, right? Out of high school. That's one way to do it. If you're not going into the union, there are non-union organizations like, for instance, electricians. A lot of kids, if kids can get interested in trades or construction in general, most of them want electrical engineering or being an electrician. IEC is a national organization that has apprenticeship programs, I think in like 50 plus cities. And I want to say the starting wage is maybe $15 an hour. But by the time they're done, it's over $30 an hour, plus health benefits, plus you can work overtime. Plus, you have a skill that if you want to start a business, and the best way to start a business is to have a skill that people need and one that you have a license for and can take responsibility for. That's what you want, and that's what you really want in your toolkit, because there's no glass ceiling once you have that.
Right. Do you know what age kids can start apprenticeships? Is it 18, or is it just dependent on the city? And
it's depending on who will hire you. I think 18 is the logical answer just because of high school. But if I were young today, plumber, electrical, HVAC, that's the order that I would try to seek opportunities. Now, it's really simple. The best thing that you can do if you're in high school, use the Google machine, find out all of your local contractors, right? That's how I found my job in Florida when I moved to Florida. I called over 30 companies, cold called them. Hey, I'm so-and-so, here I am, right? If you're young, hey, you need somebody to do whatever kind of labor, sweep your floor, make copies, do whatever. Just call them, see what you can get, because the best education that you're ever going to find is working in the real world and being around people that have knowledge about an industry. So that's what I would say. And part of what I want to do with Prime to Rise is help young people do that. I want to hold their hand through that process, right? What do you have to put on a resume? How do you take an interview? What skills do they want to hear that you have? What mindset do you want to hear that they have? How should you dress? Where do you go from there, right? Once that's on your resume. I want to help people do all those things, because I don't think there's anybody doing that, period, across the board, and we need it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, another arrow for your quiver there, Ike, as you're driving into Coeur d'Alene. So I'm in the Panhandle of Idaho. As you're driving into Coeur d'Alene, there's a big billboard that says electricians, no experience necessary, $39 to $49 an hour to start.
wow.
And that's never, I mean, you even go to union halls around the country, like in Boston, the electrical union was advertising on monster.com at one point. Typically, like if you go on 10, 20, 30 years ago, you had to know somebody to get in.
Right.
Because people were making so much money and they were aware of the opportunity. And kids today, they just don't, I don't know if it's that they don't want to get their fingernails dirty, or if it's that they just don't understand. I mean, I've had a few videos go viral now, and I can tell the way that thousands of people are responding in the DMs and in the comments, that there is just this false narrative out there with the money to be made. I have an electrician in my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
He was working at a big HVAC contractor for a long time as an electrician. He said, screw it, I could be making more money on my own. He showed me a check. We were at a friend's house the other night, $10,000 in a week.
Wow.
And he doesn't even have He doesn't even have his own license. He borrows somebody else's license to pull the permits.
Wow.
But his phone is off the hook. He can't replicate himself enough to cover all of the business opportunities that he had. And it's not, he doesn't have a website. He doesn't have anything. It's purely word of mouth because people are that hungry for that skill set.
And they don't care that he doesn't have a license?
So he pulls a permit, right? But he pays somebody else to use their license, and they are then responsible for it.
Got it.
Basically, it's very common.
Do you think so? In 08, right, when the housing market did crash, that is still in the back of some, either maybe the adults' minds of these children, or maybe the kids experienced it and they lost their houses. And because at that point in history, there weren't construction jobs, right? Everyone was getting laid off. So do you think that that's part of the issue right now with this next generation of being scared to jump into it?
Well, I think it depends,
we're such
right?
in a different place now, right, where we need them.
I think it depends, right? So I did an episode a few weeks back where I talked about the difference between renovation work, service work, and new construction, right? So when the economy tanks, new developments, full stop, yes, they don't happen anymore. One of the reasons that I tell people plumbing, electrical, engineering, HVAC, is because those allow you to do service work. Doesn't matter what happens to the economy. I need my AC to work in Florida. For damn sure, right? I better be able to flush my toilet and the lights better turn on, right? So, right. And, additionally, when you look at the big companies on the commercial side, they get tax breaks for capital improvements. They get, rebates for this upgrade and that upgrade. And, they have all of these programs so they can incentivize. And when you hear about companies not paying taxes, a lot of that has to do with some credits that they get, like in certain cities, Chicago, New York, Boston, some places that have historical buildings, they'll end up doing historical restoration work that is a tax credit, right? So there are ways, number one, people always need service work. And number two, the people with the big bucks, they have incentive programs to keep doing something, right? So so there's that piece. And then I think the messaging is just off. There's so much wrong with the messaging that we give our young people today, period. Like I want you to go to college, right? And it's like, well, why? And if you can't give me a reason why or something that you want to go for, then the comment of, well, I want you to go for the social aspect comes up, right? Because there's some mythical, like authoritarian pedestal or social credit system that like you get to be at the top of because you went to college.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, so it only takes an $11,000 tuition to put yourself in $100,000 debt on an interest rate at 6.5%. Right. So even on a state school with a really cheap rate, you're going to give yourself $100,000 tab to do what? Go to school for biology and make $30,000 a year? Like, are you aware of that? Or do you want to go get an education in something that people will always need, no matter what the economy is? You might have to sweat a little bit, but there's no glass ceiling that you can rise out of the field as a project manager, executive, your own entrepreneur, all of these things. So the messaging, there's Mike Rowe, right? Mike Rowe is the only guy. And then after him, even him, it's like I don't want to dump on Mike Rowe because he's the only guy out there. But it's like he talks about how noble it is. Stop talking about how noble it is, right? Like, what's noble? Making a ton of money and making your community better and providing a better life for your family. Like, that's what we need to get the messaging back.
I mean, to your point, the friend you had dinner with the other night, 10 grand, that's $500,000 a year, right? Like, no one's sharing that with the kids.
What's wrong with that?
Right.
And imagine if he gets that's just with him and one guy. So what if he adds 2 employees and 3 employees?
Right. Scale.
And I mean, but again, nobody can find anybody. I think, Keith, the video that you found of me, initially, for every 7 people that leave the industry, retire or die, only 1 comes in. Okay. So again, 7
Say that again.
7 people walk out the door, only 1 comes in.
In the industry of
sweeping a broom, turning a wrench, executive, architect, anybody, right? And that's a statistic from the ACE Mentor Program, which is a national organization. They have huge network, ton of resources to pull data like that.
That's a scary stat. So who's going to be fixing our toilets in 10 years if there's no one to call?
Well, and the stat behind that one is that 42%, it's almost 50% of the industry is over 46. I think it was. It's a 42 or 46. But in the trades, so since I've made that post, I have people pinging me from New Zealand, Scandinavia, Australia, literally Canada, everywhere, London. And they're all saying the same thing. Oh, mate, over here, it's more like 51. Over here, it's more like 59. The average plumber right now is 59.
So Ike, is this a result of, okay, I'm going to show my age. I'm 42, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grew up through the 80s and 90s. And at that point, like, a college degree meant something. And the pressure from society to go to college and get a good job was really interesting. So, so now that product has kids, teens, 20s, right? And they're coming into the market. Like, are we paying the price for maybe a social programming that we went through in the 80s and 90s?
100%. I mean, I even know people in the trades in my neighborhood, right? Where I live. I know a guy who he's a sales rep for an HVAC company. He's doing over 300 a year, right? Quite a bit of money. He even wants his kids, and he didn't go to college. He even wants his kids to go to college just for the sake of it.
Huh.
Right. So it's like, I think there was a social thing to it. And I also think that it was way more attainable at the time. I mean, people want to talk about, not to get into politics because there's an argument on both sides of this, right? But the student loans and making them free or making them not free. Let's talk about how expensive it is. Why isn't anybody talking about how expensive it is and why it's expensive? Maybe it's expensive because it's the only loan that you can get in your entire life where you don't have to have a credit history, you don't have to have a stream of income, and the bank takes zero risk. They will sign that ticket all day for your art, theater, whatever major degree that won't even make you $20,000 a year, but will cost you $300,000 in a loan that will, after the interest rate, will then cost you $1 million. I don't think that it was that.
They're guaranteed to get paid back. You can't file bankruptcy, you can't do anything. You're going to get paid back unless the government steps in. They're still going to get paid back.
There is zero risk, right, for somebody to pay.
So
it happened in 08, right? Like, people were signing up for loans that they couldn't afford.
If I do a loan like that, where I don't prove income, I don't prove credit, I don't prove ability to repay, guess what? I go to jail.
Right. Yeah.
I go to jail.
Yeah, not Sally Mae.
It blows my mind, and just to talk about tuition, I think tuition should be based on the outcome of what that product will produce for the life of that student, right? I also, the Hawaiian shirt may give it away. I'm a theater major doing mortgages, right? So if I did go to a 4-year college, I went to UW and I came out as a theater major, and my longevity was like $27,000, $20,000 or $30,000 a year in that profession. And so I switched, but I mean, I would have come out with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to be able to make a paycheck at $27,000 a year. Yeah. How is that responsible, and how is that helping anybody get up in this world? It blows my mind. So we have this very, very vivid debate.
I mean, even when you talk about a nursing degree, right? The most consistent return is a nursing degree, right? No matter what state, $60,000 to $65,000 a year coming out for a bachelor's degree. So why would you go to a school that it's going to cost you $300,000 when you could go to a community college for a tenth of the cost to make the same money? Because of some status, like you want to tell people about that you have? Well, are they going to pay when you have a $100,000 bill? Are they going to pay the $500 a month? If it's a $200,000 bill, it's like $1,500 a month. If it's a $300,000 bill, it's like $2,000 a month. Who's paying that? Who's paying that when you go out of college? And nobody's talking. When I go to schools and I say, first thing I start with, I said, is the money, right? I say, who knows what ROI is? In a classroom of 30, maybe 1-2 people know.
What age are you talking to? High school?
High school.
Okay.
Yeah. When I say this, then when I get to the interest rate and I say, who knows what an interest rate is? Crickets. It's like, guys, you're about to sign up for like next to whatever mortgage you get for your house. This is going to be the biggest loan that you're going to go for ever. And nobody's telling them about it, and they can't walk away from it. I mean, you can get out of it. You can declare, you can foreclose, you can file bankruptcy, you can get out of loans all different ways. This one you can't. So you really got to understand what you're doing, and nobody's telling them.
Wow.
That's
kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So we're right at our half an hour. I want to be conscientious of your time. I know we had some technical difficulties, but couple things. Ike, how can people get a hold of you? And then what parting words of wisdom can you share with us?
Get a hold of me on Instagram is probably the best way. You can DM me. I try to respond to everybody, no matter what, even if it's negative. At Prime2Rise. So Prime, the number 2, Rise. You can go to my website. I have a student loan and budget calculator. It's a spreadsheet that I put together. It has a sample budget that you can do for yourself. You can type in what your tuition is going to be. It'll tell you what your payments are going to be at certain interest rates. And then I have a list of maybe 100, 150 schools, something like that, where you can see majors, what their starting salaries are, and and what it costs. So it'll give you that ratio, right? I want to offer that for free in the future. I want to have courses and mentoring up there. For now, if you DM me, I'll give you my advice for free. And when I say I'm going to have it up there and people will pay for it, I'm talking like $20. Like I want to make it as absolutely cheap as possible. But my time is worth something to me too.
Yep, absolutely.
The last thing that I would say is for anybody, it's very easy for people to say and to preach, go into a trade, go to college for this or that, or try to get a return on investment for your education. What you really got to do is you got to envision what your life looks like at 20, 25, 30, 40. Do you have a family? Are you traveling? Are you doing whatever you want? Find a purpose. Find how you want to bring value to your community.
I love that.
And then try to tailor the career that you pick to fit that purpose. Like, I'm sure most plumbers out there don't love the way it smells all the time, right? But they're bringing a value to their community. They are able to bring above average, even the guy. So the episode that I uploaded today, he started a plumbing business 3 years ago. He's doing 10 million a year right now. Okay.
Wow.
So how do you visualize yourself? What's your purpose? What value are bringing to other people? And how is your career? How is your investment in your education going to fit that purpose? That's where you should start. Don't listen to anybody that tells you, oh, go find yourself until you're 30 years old. You just wasted 15 years of sweat equity when you could have been getting ahead of that curve.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, though, you're not against college, because you went to college yourself. It's just being aware of what your purpose is and why you're going. Yeah.
100%. So people think that I am against college. I'm not against college. That's why I did on the calculator. You'll see, like at Vanderbilt University, for instance, $90,000 a year. If you're going to go to Vanderbilt, don't go for biology or communications. USC at $77,000 a year. The number one major is communications, and you come out making like 30 grand a year. Or you can go for electrical engineering, coming out making 70 grand a year. Go for electrical engineering. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. Okay. I have a master's degree in business. I'm not against college. I am pro an intelligent investment in your education that will give you the right return.
Yeah.
There it is.
Pro. And college is not the only education, is my point. And if you're going to go for the right reasons. Don't go for the social aspect. Go because it is an investment in your future, your family's future, your community's future. That's why you go to college.
I love it.
Love it. Absolutely.
Yes. If you're ever on the West Coast, let us know. I mean, I know you were in California, but if you ever come to Washington, Idaho, let us know.
Yeah.
I had a job in Bellevue get canceled.
Oh
no! But hopefully I'll be back.
Yeah.
Well, there's plenty of building going on in Bellevue, so there's a high likelihood of that happening. So,
like we said, Din Tai Fung is like one of my top 3 restaurants anywhere. So any reason to go to Bellevue, I'm down.
It is good. Wow.
I will take you to dinner at Din Tai Fung.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you coming on here and sharing your knowledge with everybody. and look forward just to continuing to watch your message and help perpetuate your message, man. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's fun.
Thanks, Ike.
Absolutely. We'll catch you later.
That's fascinating. I can't wait for Henry to get home and I'll be like, Henry, we're going to call some people and you're going to start sweeping some floors.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a powerful thing. And I love Ike's final sentiment there is go after your purpose and do what's right for that. Whether it is college, whether it's doing an internship, find that and go forth and conquer. So right on. Well, thank you everybody for joining us with another amazing episode of Real Estate Now. We'll catch you next time, and have a great afternoon and enjoy.
Yes.